So anyway, what I want to do in this video regarding the Mandela effect is offer a different perspective on what is possibly taking place right now. And the two, the from my like I've been aware of this concept for a few years now, but I never did any sort of like extensive research or contemplation on it. I was just kind of agreeing, like, oh yeah, I remember Berenstain, I remember all of these things. Yeah, what's going on here, right? Um, but over the past couple of weeks, I've kind of really done some serious contemplation on the issue and researched it a little bit more just to see what other people have been saying about it. And from what I can gather, um, the Mandela effect, there are two main theories as to what is taking place to explain this, right? Because everyone agrees that this is a real phenomenon, and I would agree with that as well. I mean, it's definitely real. Our memories aren't lying to us. It's just a matter of what is causing that, right? And arriving at that why is never an easy. It's never an easy process when you're dealing with, you know, the lies that we've been. When you're dealing with a system that is intentionally lying to you at every turn, figuring out the why of something can become very convoluted. But the first popular idea is, well, and I'm going into this, and let me just say I'm going into this in the context of um, the irony. Well, we'll get to that. So the first one is that reality is a simulation run by artificial intelligence, right? That we live in a sort of simulated matrix, um, where we're artificial intelligence that has been programmed by some outside programmer. And in that context, the Mandela effect is analogous to like a server reset. For example, in the actual movie The Matrix, where the experience of deja vu was the result of the machine intelligence changing something in the system. So people would argue, yeah, see, we live in a simulation, and this is evidence of that, where they did a server reboot, as it were, metaphorically, and there's a certain segment of people that didn't assimilate that update fully. It's a bug, right, in that sort of language, and and that would explain the Mandela effect of why these certain people's memories are conflicting with what is now consensus reality, supposedly. And then the second idea that's out there is quantum jumping, right? That the idea that your certain people's conscious awareness has shifted from one timeline to another, and they've carried over those memories into this timeline. And I'm going to get into that idea more as we go, but those are the two main ideas. And the irony, as we'll get into as well, is that these two ideas are becoming very prevalent in the realm of quantum physics. There is a lot of groundswell around the many worlds interpretation, or the multiverse, as well as the idea that reality is a simulation. And so it is supremely ironic that the group of people that are discussing the Mandela effect would, being at the level they are, they would intuitively jump on that anti-science bandwagon, and yet they don't realize that the two main ideas that they are propagating regarding the Mandela effect are emerging phenomena in quantum physics. And going back to what I was saying just a few minutes ago about quantum physics being a philosophy, that it's not real. It's to be frank, it's bullshit. Um, so there's a real irony there to that. And just looking into where I think it's useful to go to Google Trends and look at when this phenomena really began taking off. And you can see that it kind of started in November, December 2013. I remember hearing about it in like the spring of 2014, around that time. And then it was just kind of a thing, right? And then all of a sudden, in June, July 2015 into August, it exploded. And you have this just parabolic curve, and then it kind of regresses and is stabilized at this much higher level of interest. And what is really interesting is when I looked into this topic more deeply, especially on YouTube, what I noticed is that there is a statistically improbable number of people discussing both the Mandela effect and the flat Earth, and it should. I mean, I can hear a skeptic now saying, "Well, that's because it's the group of people doing that are both truth seekers, and so they're going to be more open to this concept." And it's like, well, that's one perspective. If you're viewing the flat Earth resurgence as some sort of natural phenomenon, well, when from my perspective, and I think this is obvious, the flat Earth rejuvenation, quote unquote, is likewise a massive psychological operation, which is not to say that there isn't some truth in there, or that, I mean, shit, is the Earth flat? Maybe, I don't know. But what I'm saying here is that the quote unquote movement is a ridiculous psychological operation, and all of the personalities in it are just frauds. There is no question about that to me. So what's interesting is when I saw this Mandela effect curve, is I remember when I was looking at the flat Earth curve, and how it really started, kind of just so contrived and out of nowhere in the spring of 2015, and then it had this likewise parabolic curve, and then regression. And this is only speculation on my part, but I would speculate that some big player in the flat Earth psychological operation started talking about the Mandela effect, and that's what caused the similar surge in the trend for the Mandela effect, like in conjunction with the flat Earth. Um, so it's likewise interesting. Let me take away the flat Earth real quick. Well, before I do that, you can see how the Mandela effect is still really small. There's really not a lot of people talking about it. I mean, definitely more interest than there used to be, but it's still very small compared to this. But going back and looking at it, what I find likewise very interesting is that there is no search index volume for the Mandela effect anywhere outside of, well, Australia seems wrong. I think I can't even remember seeing somebody from Australia talk about this. Anyway, but it's almost entirely confined to the United States, Canada, and Great Britain, the United Kingdom, which makes perfect sense if you're viewing this the way, in the context that I'm viewing this, as a psychological operation, because the Mandela effect is based on U.S. culture, right? I mean, you just look at what is it? It's movie quotes, children's books, maps that are produced by these countries. I mean, there's all kinds of them, right? But primarily, it is based in things that were a product of U.S. culture, right? So it only makes sense that these would be the people that would be aware of it, or have the quote unquote false memories. But here's my my question to you is, if people literally shifted timelines, right, from one alternate reality to another, wouldn't there be people in all these other countries that are reporting similar things with their own memories, that should stick out as a problem. That's a big problem. That there's no mention of this anywhere outside of these Crown Temple subsidiaries. That should make you go, right? Um, so, what's also very interesting to me is that Fiona Broome, she launches this Mandela Effect website in 2010. And apparently is one of two people that coined the phrase the Mandela Effect. And then she just kind of goes through the buildup of her website. So just the website existed in 2010, and then it didn't kind of until like the late summer of 2015 is when it really kind of became a phenomenon, right? And when you look into her background, it's very, very questionable because, excuse me, I'll just read it. Many years ago, I was one of the two people who coined the phrase Mandela effect during a conversation in Dragon Con's green room. The other person was called Shadow, then a Dragon Con security manager. I have no idea which of us started using the phrase first. It started when Shadow mentioned that, like me, other people remembered Nelson Mandela's tragic death in a South African prison. Apparently, others in the green room shared that memory. So I researched the concept and, with my publisher support, started this website for additional research. With my publisher support, I thought it was an interesting fringe topic and potential book topic for my spare time. It turned into something much bigger. Yes, of course it did. And when you look into her background, oh boy, Fiona has been researching and writing about paranormal phenomena since the 1980s. In the 1990s, her ghost-related website, hollowhill.com, was one of the first online resources for new and experienced ghost hunters. It's still home to the most popular free course for new ghost hunters, Introduction to Ghost Hunting. Miss Broome has written about ghosts, fairy lore, and anomalies for over 1,000 articles. I don't know who wrote this, but not very good. And anomalies for over 1,000 articles for magazines and websites. Discussing paranormal topics, she's been a guest on many radio and TV shows. Fiona has also been a speaker and panelist at a wide range of international events, including the New England Ghost Conference, Ghost Stock, Central Texas Paranormal Conference, and Canada's annual Ghost Conferences. Since 2006, she's been a frequent invited guest and panelist at DragonCon. So the person responsible for sort of injecting the idea of the Mandela effect in alternate memories / alternate realities is a very well-known figure in the sort of paranormal world. And I don't have to tell you, if you've done any research into the paranormal circuit of information, that there are just not. Now, I'm not saying that this woman is a fraud. I'm just saying, by association, there are many disinformation agents in that sort of field who kind of capitalize on people's inner Fox Mulder, I want to believe, and make money off of that feeling, right? So I'm just saying, I don't know anything about this person. I don't want to guilt by association her, but this is very, very questionable. When you have something as earth-shattering as the idea of conscious awareness shifting from a parallel dimension, you got to have your guard up and really look into these people with a critical eye. So before going further into the Mandela effect, I know this is going to seem random, but I want to go into just an example of what we're dealing with on the internet. And this specifically relates to James Trafficant and the patriot lore that has sprung up around him. And this mostly stems from a speech that he apparently gave titled "The Bankruptcy of the United States." And this is in the U.S. Congressional Record, March 17th, 1993, volume 33, page H/1303. And he says, "Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the U.S. government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act, March 9th, 1933. Now, the problem, of course, is that when you actually go to the speech and look it up, what you find is that this is a complete fabrication, that Jim Traficant did not say anything after this first paragraph. So when we go back to here, just look for the word demise, and that'll be the last word before this starts. So look at the next word after demise. So we come down here. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future. There are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. I am going to support the rule. I am not sure yet if I will support this budget. I want to hear an awful lot more, not being a member of the committee, and I am not going to vote for things I do not understand or do not like. But let there be no mistake. After 12 years of Ronald Reagan and George Bush, we are standing here. Let me say this to the minority party. Every program that Ronald Reagan wanted in 1981, Reagan got it. There was a Republican, blah, blah, blah. So you can see he's talking about Republican, Democrat issues. But in the context that he mentions the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, he's talking about the budget and the stupid fake politics between left and right that are usually going on about the budget, right? And if you go down through and read the whole quote unquote speech that he gave, you'll see that that's what he was referring to. So what this means is that someone actually took the initiative to go on the internet and state that James Traficant said all of this stuff that he didn't say. And of course, it all ties into what people would, it's the legal information that you get into. People would call it like the sovereignty movement, but that's a joke. I mean, that's just more controlled opposition. There is a very core truth to all of this legal fraud that has taken place. However, this is how they do their psychological operations: is they go in and they give you some quote that never existed, and then everyone goes around giving their energy to James Traficant and this idea that he was some sort of hero on the House floor telling the truth. And then they do that. They weave that into the lore of Jim Traficant. And, I even bought into this for a little while too, because he's from where I'm from, right? He's from Northeast Ohio. And so I was kind of like, yeah, you tell him, man. But back when I didn't know anything. But they create this whole backstory for him where, he was brought up on RICO charges, and then he defended himself and he won. He was like the only person to represent himself pro se and win against a RICO charge. And that sort of launched him into the House. That launched him into the public mind, gave him a little street cred. And then along with Pat Buchanan, right? I mean, that should tell you everything you need to know. He was supporting this guy who, according to Traficant and Buchanan, was unjustly accused of being this Ivan the Terrible from the concentration camps. And of course, we know the concentration camps are a lie. So this whole story is just concocted from the get-go. And well, of course, they put people in the camps for the staged event nature of it, but they weren't death camps. And I suppose there could have been some Ivan the Terrible that really just was a dick, but they're not in the way that they would describe this guy, right? So anyway, Traficant supports this guy, and then that ingratiates him into the white nationalist controlled opposition fronts. and he becomes affiliated with like American Free Press, who's a they're affiliated with like, oh man, David Duke, just that whole strain, Michael Collins Piper, um, everyone associated with American Free Press is, Ron Paul. They're all very, very suspect, and Jim Traficant had a column on there, and then they bring this they bring these bribery charges against him, saying, or not bribery, I think it was he used campaign funds improperly or whatever. So then they send him to jail, which gives him even more cred, which feeds even further into this fake quote, right? And of course, he probably never even went to jail. They probably had him at a retreat somewhere, right? No one would know the difference. Right, and then when he gets out of prison, he's affiliated with the fake Tea Party and all that bullshit. So it's really just kind of incredible, right? That people would the disinformation campaign would go to. I mean, how easy was this? How easy was it for them to just clip a little first paragraph, and then put in all of this other stuff, some of which is true, some of which isn't, and then you just watch it unfold. You just watch people run with it, and you ask anybody now in the quote unquote alternative media, and most of them would say, "Oh yeah, I know James Traficant. He's the one who talked about the bankruptcy of the U.S. On the House floor." So the reason that I know that seems kind of like neither here nor there regarding the Mandela effect, but I hope you can see how easy it would be to start, because then you have articles like this. UC Davis spent thousands to scrub pepper spray references from the internet. And this article, you might remember, like back in that bullshit Occupy Wall Street, totally fabricated, staged protests. I hope you realize that they were paying all of those main players to go protest, and then they get all the dupes to come with them, and then the media runs with the narrative. It's just totally contrived and concocted. But you might remember that during that time there was that pepper spraying where the officer pepper sprayed those students, and that was probably staged too. They were probably just operatives, young people who were getting pepper sprayed. Maybe not. I mean, it's possible they were real people, but so after that, UC Davis contracted with consultants to scrub the internet of negative online postings. And the point of me bringing up this article is that if UC Davis, just some college, has the ability to hire some firm that specializes in doing this, do you think it's possible that the people or force that created the internet itself through DARPA and all the permutations that expand from DARPA, do you think it's possible that they would have all of the coded backdoors and infrastructure to go in and digitally scrub information that they didn't want? Do you think that's possible? Yeah, I think that's very possible. And that is how that I know a lot of people are talking about, as I was saying earlier, the Mandela effect either being evidence of the computer simulation we live in, or being evidence of quantum jumping, right? But what I'm offering here is a third interpretation, sort of a middle ground interpretation that, sure, while a lot of the concepts that underpin the idea of a simulated reality or a quantum reality are legitimate, and there is some truth in there, because of course there has to be truth in there or the concepts would never fly. While that's legitimate, I think there's more of a middle ground here, where this is a psychological operation that is playing on all sorts of different themes. I think a logical, skeptical response would be, well, hold on a second. If what you're saying is true, and this is a psychological operation, why wouldn't they just scrub everything and they have the ability you were describing, why wouldn't they just scrub everything from the internet as a whole? Like every trace of it, so that people would really only have their memories to rely on, and that would even kind of drive them further crazy. And the answer to that is they have to. You see, they don't. That's my whole point about it being a psychological operation, is they don't want it to be something where there's no evidence of it. They want it to be something where the people that get tricked into believing this is a real phenomena, they have evidence to point to. That's why you can go still find all of these clips of on like newspaper archives that you can bring up digitally. You can find all of these clips of the Berenstain Bears, EIN, Fruit Loops, FRUIT, interview with a vampire. And so they want those things to be there because it fuels the memories of these things, and then fuels the Mandela effect narrative, which is likewise fueling the 21st century quantum physics, that ideas in the quantum philosophy that are coming out now. Mainly the idea of the multiverse, which is becoming more and more popular. And as we'll get into, the multiverse is just another way of saying that reality is an illusion, which is what all of the mystic and esoteric traditions likewise state. And you see, so when someone says, well, what would be the goal of this psychological operation? Well, the goal of it is to give a different portion of the collective subconscious or psyche, to give, like, say, the atheists a vehicle through which to arrive at the quote unquote truths of esoteric thought or Eastern religion or Gnostic philosophy, or however you want to view it, right? This is a way, the multiverse is a way for the atheist mind, or the strictly scientific mind, to arrive at the same conclusion that reality is some sort of illusion, right? And that's what the multiverse, the many worlds hypothesis, postulates. It is that for every at every moment, your awareness is branching off into trillions upon trillions of possibilities over its lifetime, and that each of those possibilities creates its own separate physical universe that you are existing in. And all science fiction now that deals with time travel focuses on this theme. It's obvious that they have a lot invested in the coming popularity of the multiverse theory. And so the Mandela effect seems to legitimize the multiverse, you see. And that is why they would put this psychological operation out there. So the one world religion already exists. It just has not been sufficiently merged together yet. That is saying, like, the baby boomer generation of all religions will live out the revelation script in world events, and they'll just be phased out into irrelevance with the new, spirit science-based millennial generations, right? And this was the brilliance of merging religion into U.S. political theater via the evangelical bloc on the quote-unquote right, because they you see, it's so clever. They merged that sort of quote unquote stupidity of mainstream Christianity and churches into the political structure, which is of course ridiculous. And they underscore that by having all of these people now support Trump by default, who is then portrayed as insane or Hitler by the quote unquote left, and further associating religion with that idea. And what that does is it gets young people to look at religion and in combination with all of the quote unquote left programming that they receive through the media and movies and television and all that, they look at that idea of religion and they just say, oh, that is just crazy. I want no part of that. These people are all stupid, blah, blah, blah. And so they reject religion altogether, not understanding that there is truth in the Bible in the sense that it is multi-layered with meaning. And they had to take some of the teachings of some of the correct teachings on how to perceive this reality and interact with it, some of those correct teachings had to be incorporated, or it never would have been assimilated like it was. So by default, the young people will reject all of that, and then they will gravitate towards quantum ideas of quantum science and atheism, right? And or not even atheism, right? They'll navigate, if they are an atheist, they will navigate only towards ideas of quantum science. And if they have if they become susceptible to the new age programming that's going on, they will then become they'll become more amenable and begin to repeat the ideas that are quote unquote mystical, that are inherent to all of those traditions about the illusory nature of this reality, right? And so you can, but my point being that they will bring the atheists along for the ride without them knowing it. In that the theories of quantum science are designed by their very nature, thinking that many moves in advance, to converge with all of the quote unquote ancient ideas of the nature of this reality. They're going to merge together. That's the purpose of both science and religion, but not real religion, right? Actually, let me read something. You can see an example of this. That's not it. Where was that? Oh, here it is. So now tell me if this doesn't reflect, I mean, just, name them off. Like David Icke does this, and everyone that filters down from that tree. But let me just read this. Today, science seems to have come full circle. As we discussed at the beginning of this chapter, when we look into the history and origins of science, we discover that the first scientists, or the proto-scientists, were almost invariably mystical in their outlook or else religiously inclined. Initially, there was no separation between science or natural philosophy, as it might be known in past times, and religion, right? There's that idea that we're returning to this ancient wisdom, right? That all of the mystery schools possessed, and now science is leading it's beginning to confirm all of those ideas. We then described a schism between science and religion, which came about through a process that really got going in earnest around the time of the Enlightenment, and which continues to this day. And you can see how that's a subplot in the plan, because all of the thinkers in the Enlightenment were occultists. They were Rosicrucians, man. They were alchemists. So you can see how they kind of, the Cartesian, Newtonian, reductionist philosophy of the West was designed to create the mystic empire of the wise, the over-materialist empire and state of mind that we all live in. And then they blame us for that. And then we all go, well, yeah, we're too materialist. We're this, we're that, we're the other thing. We need to really reconsider what we're doing here. And then that opens the door for not only these new ideas of science, but these new ideas of mysticism. And all of the occult writers talk about this. Blavatsky talks about it. Alice Bailey talks about it. They all talk about this returning synthesis. And that's what they are designed to do. That's why, going back to the idea of these thinkers in the Enlightenment, that was all a creation that was designed to escalate into what it escalated into, so that it can be consolidated now. It's no different than a corporation consolidating. And what they're keeping are the technological advancements of that came from that science, but they're going to get rid of the materialist underpinning of that, where nature can be reduced to its parts and viewed in a machine-like fashion. So, but now we are seeing how the cutting edge. Oh, did I? I don't know. Did I read this whole thing? We then described a schism between science and religion, which came about through. Oh yeah, I did. Sorry. But now we are seeing how the cutting edge of science is starting to confirm timeless mystical truths that exist at the heart of all the world's great faith traditions. I've given a few examples, but this is really the tip of the iceberg. I believe that this is a trend which is set to continue, whereby we may expect to see in the future a continuing and progressive convergence between science and religion. What I am not talking about is the substantiation through science of those aspects of religion which has caused sensible people to abandon organized religion in droves. i.e., the senseless rules, the rituals, regulations, together with the unconvincing fairy tales and fantasies presented as absolute truth. And there is what I was just talking about. How in the United States they merge, and of course it's not just the United States. I mean, they do this uh, in Judaism, they do it in the Muslim faith, and in its own way, it's done in the Hindu and Buddhist religions of the East. But where they're purposely they have orchestrated events so that sensible people will abandon organized religion in droves, quote unquote sensible, right? And well, speaking on this base level perspective, of course, organized religion is a joke. The Vatican is a corporation and a pretty evil entity. If we want to, I mean, come on, considering what they do to children. But the Vatican is just an extension of the control system in general and what they do to children. It's really fucked up. There's no question about it. But anyway, I'm losing my focus here. So you can see how the younger generations will look at these senseless rules, rituals, regulations, blah blah blah, and then they abandon that idea of organized religion, and then they're open to the new the religion of sustainability, right? The Baha'i ideas that are filtered through the UN, all of that sort of artificial one consciousness fraud that's taking place. And of course, that one consciousness idea has roots in all of the quote unquote ancient writings and mystical traditions. And then that one consciousness idea is likewise being adopted by science, and well, I should quote unquote science and quantum physics and mechanics, which are trying to tell you the same thing now, that reality is just entirely an illusion. I mean, shit. Neil deGrasse Tyson just came out and said he thinks there's a very high chance the universe is just a simulation, And the trick of it is that all of these science-minded people would say, well, yeah, science, or well, yeah, okay, I can get behind the idea that reality is a simulation, and that there's some, they would probably lean more towards like an alien presence or some sort of physical object in space that's doing it, or some physical beings that are running the server farm, right? That produced our consciousness. But this would jive exactly with ancient esoteric and mystical beliefs, which would just say, oh yeah, well yeah, it's a simulation. It's God's simulation. It's all simulated from the mind of God, right? So you can see how those ideas are converging. And while there is, of course, truth in the idea that we are simply the result of God's dreaming, quote unquote God, right? There is the very insidious like nature of all of this propaganda is that reality is entirely an illusion and your reality is completely subjective, and that's just it's the observer effect, right? In quantum physics, like they will say, oh yeah, nothing exists until you observe it. Like the reality is an illusion. These quantum particles don't really exist. They're just energy anyway, and they don't exist until you observe them. And that's no different than any of these ancient traditions would say. So it's very, very clever what they're doing, and you can see how there's going to be this. Well, what I was going to say is the only people that'll be left out of this are going to be the baby boomer generations, who are all still caught up in the idea of the rapture and all of the stuff that goes along with the Bible and the Quran, and the Old Testament. And you can see how all of these, the staged events and the fake ISIS psychological operation and all of that is there's an undercurrent of them fulfilling biblical prophecy, because that will entrench the baby boomer generation that's very religious even further, and then their mental energy will be used to bring about the chaos that the change will be synergetically implemented through. Because without them, they were just the pre-planned foil to the plan. Without them, it wouldn't be possible. If all the baby boomers just said, well, I'm not, I think you're full of shit telling me about all of this doom, and I'm not going to listen to you anymore, well, the whole thing would just fall apart. So I hope you can see how the Mandela effect is a function of this, because not while right now it's only on the fringe of YouTube that is discussing this. This is something that everyone. I mean, I was listening to one channel and he called his aunt and just was like, going talking to her about this stuff. This is something that you can talk to anyone in reality, and in doing so, you can introduce them to the idea of you can put a splinter in their mind, man. And there's a lot of people kind of freaking out about this, like, oh my gosh, we changed dimensions. Oh, and that makes me think of, just on this point. This is another channel, Brian Preston, that has a lot of Mandela effect videos, and so he just comes out with a video right after he says that the newest Mandela effect is that they changed human physiology, that we quantum jumped into bodies that have a different physiology. And I mean, how hard would it be to, how hard would it be to, like they do with the maps and all the different country sizes, how hard would it be to put a few maps out there that are different, put a few things of human anatomy that are different out there, and get people to question where their organs really were. And again, that does go back to the idea of some people's memories being better than others, some people being more susceptible to herd influence than others. Oh my gosh, I remember where my heart was. It's not there, like you can see how this is really going to mess with people. And so what does this guy do? He comes out and says, what do you do now that you know about the Mandela effect? Oh, well, you just adopt this chakra consciousness and, start trying to get on that wavelength, right? Oh, that's the answer. What was I just saying? They're merging the science and the religion, right? So, in this case, this would be like an Eastern version of spirituality, right? Well, yeah, just get into that. I mean, that just exemplifies everything that I'm talking about. I don't want to put words exactly in his mouth.
This is your third eye, throat, chest, etc. And so it's kind of like, I like parables. If you're a race car, you want to make sure the computer is working perfectly. That's your.
Well, I don't really feel like listening to that. So let's see, where was I? I guess I'll finish reading this. Maybe we'll go back to that. These are the the senseless rules, blah, blah, blah. These are the so-called outer mysteries of religion and comprise what comes to mind to most people when they think about religion. Instead, I am talking about the inner mysteries, the esoteric hidden truths, and the mystical heart that exists within all the world's great religions. Within these inner mysteries, we discover a constellation of beliefs that are common to the esoteric core of all the world's great faiths. For example, the belief in the state of union with God, and the associated idea that God is within us. Also, as discussed earlier, is the recurring idea of the unity of God, the oneness of all things, and the oneness of all people. There you go. It is these inner mysteries that science is confirming, and vice versa. It is these inner truths of religion which may help us to understand and integrate some of these discoveries happening at the forefront of humankind's quest for knowledge. In the long run, I believe we can expect to see a full and complete integration of science and religion, and that's exactly what they have planned. You just have to view it on a long enough time scale. I mean, it's hard to imagine a world 50 years from now just because of the way that technology seems to be doubling in shorter and shorter instances. But I mean, it would be so easy for them to convince people that science has proved religion in that way. I mean, that's what's going to happen. That is the new world order religion. It's not going to be Prince William coming out and saying, this is the new religion. No, it's Satanism. No, they're gonna covertly give you Satanist, quote unquote Satanist ideas, like a cult, whatever you want to view it, just wrong-minded ways of perceiving this reality. They're going to give you that through science and the quote unquote inner mysteries of religion and mysticism, and they're going to make you think that it's progress. I mean, that's just how they operate. So it will be realized that science, long seen as the adversary and antagonist of religion, was in reality all along religion's friend and helper. encouraging religion to abandon outdated doctrines, reject the fairy tales, and question some of the senseless rules and regulations. Also, science has been a help to religion by undermining existing religious institutions which were often corrupted or else had lost their original purpose and meaning anyway. And you can see what I was saying there about how quote unquote science and the Newtonian strain all the way up through Einstein and today was designed to do that to religion, right? Because it was contrasted with this insane version of religion that we were given in the form of churches and organized religion, right? Furthermore, science has forced religion to evolve into something better and closer to the truth of God, so that it is when science and religion fully embrace each other that we obtain better religion and a more complete science. Science is often seen as the antithesis of religion, when in actuality it was always the destiny of science to be made sacred. And that's this. What I just read is an example of someone who has lost their mind. They just and there's nothing wrong with it. Like, I entertain these ideas at a certain point too, but this is propaganda. This is not this is not accurate at all. And the Mandela effect is fueling it. So this was just an article on the many worlds interpretation, right? And I wanted to bring it up just because regarding the idea of reinforcing the infinite, quote unquote, infinite nature of the universe, right? This is the idea that is prevalent in quantum philosophy, that we are just insignificant grains of sand, on the universal beach, and we have no real meaning because look at how big this place is, and that's the idea behind the multiverse, or the underlying philosophy of it. And so that reinforces the idea that, as they say right here, the single narrative of your life is an illusion. The multi-worlds interpretation also upsets our notion of individuality. We all experience our lives as a coherent and discrete journey through what appears to be space and time. In reality, however, the self is an exponentially expanding set of instances that are branching off from moment to moment. As a result, we should not think of ourselves as individuals, but rather as multiplicities. I mean, that sounds like it came out of the fucking United Nations, for God's sake. It sounds like it sounds like I could find that in an Agenda 2050 article, It's just ridiculous. Now, of course, well, let me play along these lines. Let me play. Here's another. This is from somebody named Sean Indigo. And I think this is the most dangerous interpretation.
There are separate realities, separate physical universes, where and then there's a physical universe where it's Berenstain, and a physical universe where it's Berenstain. And how I'm perceiving it, and how I understand it, is that your conscious awareness, your awareness changes focus.
Now, I have to say that is true if it's in the context of what I was describing in the last video about in the last video when I was talking about memories, projections, and the time stream, the feedback loops of the thought form magnetic field, right? Considering your conscious awareness in that way, and the way that the memories are interacting with the projections, and how that determines the way you are moving through time, or what we consider to be time, which is just an element of being aware in this reality. So he's kind of taking that concept, but then he's going to go into it in another way and say, well, your conscious awareness it's doing this literally in the multiple trillion physical universes that you also exist in, and it switches so fast that you can't perceive it, and you have in that way switched from the Berenstain parallel dimension to this Berenstain parallel dimension. And I'm bringing this up because, as I've just shown you, well, I haven't shown you yet, but the multiverse is coming from the same people like Alan Guth and Stephen fucking Hawking, who brought you the fraudulent interpretation of black holes. And they're the same people talking about the multiverse. Okay, do you see what I'm saying here?